Okay, Chair, you're live on YouTube whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Welcome to Culture and Communities. Councillor Chris McIntyre speaking, Chair of Culture and Communities. We're streaming live to YouTube, so welcome all you YouTubers watching. So members, please, just a reminder, the usual rules apply. If you have comments or questions, please go through the chair. Thank you. So we'll crack on with the agenda. Item 1, apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. We've had apologies from Councillor Sheila Dean. Thank you.
Okay, noted. Item 2, any declarations of interest? No.
Can I just say, Chair, this is Ron. Can I just say, Chair, I have to leave at 2:30. I've got to go to a funeral.
Yeah, that's fine.
I'll
yeah.
have to go. Okay.
No problems. No problems. Okay, we'll move on to item 3. I'd like to welcome Louise Kelly to give us an update on the selective landlord licensing.
Sorry, Chair. Sorry, Chair. You've just missed out the minutes from the previous meeting.
Oh,
Chair.
yes, you're right. You're right. Yeah. Item 3, can we agree the minutes of the previous meeting, which was held on the 15th of July?
Agreed.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Okay, back to Louise Kelly. She's going to give us an update on selective landlord licensing. Members, please leave your questions till the end. Whenever you're ready. Thanks.
Thank you. I think Judith Hedgley, head of service, was going to join us. She did come on for a bit and she seems to have disappeared. So she was going to give an intro. I'll start putting the document up presentation while we're just waiting for Judith.
Chair, I believe Councillor Rostron wants your attention.
Go ahead, Councillor Rostron. Sorry, you're on mute.
I'm on now. I have difficulty with that. I don't know why. Could I ask that people do put themselves on mute, because I'm getting a lot of feedback. Thank you.
Okay. Do we know when Judith is due?
She did join, Chair, and then she, for literally 30 seconds, and then she left. So we'll see. Scott and I will see if we can get her back in.
Right, thanks.
Just while we're doing that, Louise, do you want me to throw the slides up for you? I've got them prepped here. Do you want me to do them? Oh, there you go.
It's all right.
They're coming through now. Great.
Sorry, we used to be used to WebEx, then we went to Teams, so now it's going back to WebEx. Right, okay. I think Judith was just going to start by saying when the scheme first came about, we used to sit under community safety. Now we sit under public protection, which obviously Judith Hedgley is the head of. Right, okay. So selective landlord licensing. Right, so you should all have. Sorry. So selective landlord licensing, it was brought in under the Housing Act 2004, and it's in the areas of North Ormesby and part of Newport Ward. There's the only areas at the moment that have been designated for the scheme. And the reason that they were brought in were because of experiencing low housing demand and significant and persistent antisocial behaviour in those areas. So the purpose of the scheme is to improve standards of property and management in those properties within the private rented sector. Each private property within the designated areas needs to apply for a licence, and included in that we also do a fit and proper check of the licence holder just to make sure that there are no issues with them being the management of that property. The licence lasts for a maximum of 5 years, and the reason for that is the designation is only for 5 years and no licences can go on beyond that point. And failure to apply for a licence can result in an unlimited fine, so it would go to the courts and they determine the fine for that. And if there's a breach of licence conditions, then that's a fine of up to £5,000. So who's in the team? So as I've just said, we now sit under public protection. So Judith Hedgley is our head of service and also my line manager. I manage the scheme, Louise Kelly, and then we've got 2.5 neighbourhood safety officers that are dedicated only to the licensed areas. So we've got 1.5 in Newport and 1 in North Ormesby. We've got 2 tenancy relations officers, so they go out and do the inspections along with the environmental health officers. and they also check that the tenants are getting the support they need around any housing issues. And again, we've got one in each area, Newport and Ormesby. And then we've got an officer, a 1.5 assistant, and 2 environmental health officers. Again, that's one for each area that's designated. So the scheme are in, as I said, the first scheme, North Ormesby, came about in January 2016, and that lasted for 5 years. So that scheme's now ended. And the licence fee for that scheme was £580 plus a £20 fit and proper check. During that time, we then brought in the Newport scheme. So that one started on the 13th of June 2019 and will run till 12th of June 2024. As I said, it only covers part of Newport ward, so that's why I've put the maps on there, whereas the North Ormesby one covered the whole of the North Ormesby area. Following the success of North Ormesby, we then went on to redesignate that area. So the second scheme in North Ormesby started on the 14th of June this year, and that'll go till the 13th of June 2026. Now the licence fees for Newport are £730 and the new North Ormesby £745 with the £20 fit and proper. The reason it's more expensive than the original scheme is because the original scheme was sort of part funded by the council, whereas these 2 schemes are funded solely by licence fees. Licence fees are ring-fenced to the scheme and can't be spent on anything other than the staffing and the scheme itself. So licence data. So the first North Ormesby scheme, we managed to licence 934 properties. And that exceeded, we estimated originally that we'd only have 550 properties. So we exceeded that by 164%. The Newport scheme to date, we've licensed 845 properties, and there's about a further 107 still to issue there. And again, we estimate there'd be about 800 properties. With North Ormesby in the redesignation, it only came in June as stated. So with that one, we've only managed, well, we've licensed up to now 520 properties, and we say there's about 358 outstanding. And we're estimating that there's about 878 that need to be licensed in those areas. When we look at the legal side of things, it's been relatively low. So we've only taken 4 properties have resulted in court hearings. Although more sort of were going that way, 8 landlords applied before they actually got to the court summons. So as part of the scheme, what we said, we'd inspect 100% of all properties, and this would be a multi-agency inspection. So what we do, we go to the properties, and the team consists of a tenancy relations officer and an environmental health officer. If we know there's antisocial behaviour or concerns of antisocial behaviour at the property, we'll also invite the neighbourhood safety officer along as well. So the inspections are to check compliance with licence conditions, ensure hazards and disrepairs are identified under the HHSRS, provide support to the tenants if it's needed, and that can be anything from financial advice to mental health issues, drugs and alcohol, substance misuse. We deal with it all really. And then I've just put down there some of the licence conditions. These aren't all of them, but we ask for an annual gas safety certificate. We ask for evidence of electrical equipment and furniture to be provided to show it's safe. Smoke alarms, top and bottom of the stairs, and tenant referencing, as well as the management and antisocial behaviour plans. So we talk about inspections, but I thought it's better to show you what we found. So this is actually an inspection that I went on in North Ormesby. We tried a few times to get in contact with the tenant, and it was actually a nighttime visit when we actually caught the tenant in. He was reluctant to open the door. He didn't know who we were. He was very confused of who was managing the property. Different people had been going, saying that the owner had sent them and they were the agent, but this changed as well continually for him. He did suffer with mental health issues, and like I say, he was very reluctant to let us in. Once we actually got into the property, this is what we found. So, you know, there's a lot of mould on the kitchen there is the first picture. The boiler hadn't worked for in excess of 10 years, and it's a very old boiler. And the actual picture with the pole, that was his bathroom ceiling that was ready to come down, and he made a makeshift pole to actually keep that ceiling in place. So we worked with him. The property would have actually been a prohibition order, but due to the tenant's mental health and the fact that he wanted to stay there, we worked with the landlord to try and resolve the issues. So that is the property after we'd gone in and done the inspection. The landlord was an absent landlord, so he's down in Essex, and because he couldn't get the agents in to find out about the property, he was also shocked and mortified to see the extent that the property had become. So if you can see there, the kitchen had a full new kitchen fitted in there. It's all been replastered, brand new boiler fitted, bathroom refitted, and the bottom picture is the ceiling without the pole. So how the scheme works with partners. So we do a lot of referrals and signposting to other agencies. There's been an increased report of antisocial behaviour, and that's within the community themselves. I think, you know, once a scheme came into an area, they had the confidence to report things to us. We also have the neighbourhood wardens out there, as well as ourselves doing walkabouts. So, you know, we are a face of North Ormesby and Newport, and people will come up and tell us things. We work with landlords and managing agents in supporting them to tackle antisocial behaviour, and also in serving Section 8 and 21 notices for those tenants that require it. We've also completed quite a few house closures within Newport Ward. As previously stated, we work with the street wardens, and we also have neighbourhood safety officers designated to the areas. We share intelligence on drug dealing perpetrators, properties and cannabis farms, because we're out and about when we see these. Fire safety referrals are made, so smoke alarms are fitted in every property, and we offer a home fire safety visit on each inspection if the tenant wants it. Said about walkabouts, not only do we find out about antisocial behaviour, but we also identify fly tipping while we're walking about, properties open for access. So all those are put either through to the contact centre, environmental health, or we contact the landlords ourselves if we've got the details. There's contact centre referrals. We support with facelift projects and identifying the alleys that are requiring makeovers, and work with the tenants to try and get those on board. And the work we do also complements the work of the locality-based approach, which again are in both North Ormesby and Newport Ward. How we support landlords. So we support them with the online applications and the inspection process. If we identify empty properties, then we've referred them onto the rent and refurb scheme within Middlesbrough Council. We work with them against tenancy breaches and support them with those. We've had an increased membership to the tenancy referencing service and the amount of references that we actually complete. The tenancy relations officer can support with complex issues and help the landlord as well. We've supported with rent recovery in excess of £5,000 for one landlord. We do free empty property advertising, so if they've got any empty properties in those areas, then we will advertise them for them, as long as we've got an up-to-date EPC. Again, we said we've got the dedicated neighbourhood safety officer for both wards and a tenancy relations officer. And we also do post-tenancy visits for any new tenancies. So I think as part of the documents that were sent out, we also included the evaluation of North Ormesby, just to sort of give an idea of what that scheme's done. So within North Ormesby, we found that house prices had started to increase. So in 2016, the average house price plummeted to 36,000 and increased by 17% in 2020. Turnover of tenants reduced by 50%, so a more static population, because what we were finding were tenants were just moving from one property to another, but with support we managed to sustain some of those tenancies. The number of private rented properties inspected increased, and housing conditions did improve because of that. I think prior to the scheme, it was something like in Northansby, we had 6 people inspected in 1 year, and that's because they had to come forward with those complaints. But then obviously following that, 760 properties were inspected once the scheme came in. Serious hazards, which are Cat 1 and Cat 2, there was 1,692 of those identified. And again, we supported residents with smoke alarm checks and getting smoke alarms fitted into those properties where they were missing. 154 post-tenancy visits were carried out, and again, that was to provide, you know, tenants a wide range of advice on issues, including substance issues, parent skills, unemployment. And then just some of the things, stats on antisocial behaviour. So when we do antisocial behaviour, we look at early, low and medium interventions. So 1,249 early interventions were carried out. So they're mainly referrals into other services. 2,495 low interventions. So these are like your telephone calls, emails, letter drops, diary sheets that we get, initial warnings, and patrols as well with wardens and police. We had 955 medium interventions. So these are your second warning letters, final warnings, ABCs, and tenancy breaches. And then we had 15 high-level interventions. These included criminal behaviour orders, civil injunctions, and house closures. And then the police data shows that there's been a reduction in personal antisocial behaviour incidents from 233 in 2015 to 118 in 2019, so that's 49%. And there's also been a reduction in nuisance antisocial behaviour from 337 to 301. So they're going in the right direction. So the next step, so is to continue with the current schemes that we've got going and monitor the progress and outcomes of those schemes. But we also want to consider the need of additional schemes in the town. So we're possibly looking at the Newport Phase 2, as this meets the housing stock, crime and antisocial behaviour criteria. And if we were to go ahead with the other part of Newport that's not already designated, then the process would be that we'd need to consult for 10 weeks. We need to consider and report obviously on that consultation and the outcomes. We need to seek approval from an executive, and then we'd need to designate the scheme. Once you decide to go ahead with an area and the designation's been made, the scheme then comes into effect 3 months after that. And we would do a formal notification of the scheme as we have done with the previous 2. And then if there's any further staffing that we need, then we'd have to carry out recruitment and training. We are a very small team to cover those 2 areas. So, and then the cost of implementing it as well. So the scheme's actually, the licence fee is calculated on the amount of officers' time and the cost of the preliminary checks to do those. So that's something that we'd need to consider as well. And that's it. Any questions?
Yeah, I'd just like to say...
Sorry, Chair. Louise, could you just take the presentation down just so it's easier for us to see the questions, please? Thank you.
I'll try.
Okay, before questions, I've noticed Judith Headsley has joined our meeting. Is there anything you would like to add, Judith?
Firstly, I'd like to just start by apologising for my very tardy joining the meeting. I've got very used to attending Teams meetings, and WebEx was a little bit beyond me today, so I do apologise. I really just intended to provide a very short introduction and really just to introduce myself and also Louise. Some of you might have met Louise before, but I'm Head of Public Protection, and I think previously when the selective licensing was a topic for this scrutiny, the team sat under community safety, and it now sits under my service area, which is public protection. And so I just wanted to let you know that. And I also just want to, you know, I'm as a head of service, I'm really proud of the work that the selective landlord licensing team are achieving, working very closely with other partners. So, you know, I just really wanted to flag that as well. But I don't have an awful lot to say, really, other than to apologise for being late.
No worries, Judith. Thank you. Okay, I see we have some questions. I believe. Let's have a look. Councillor Wilson, I think you were first. I'm not sure, but would you go ahead, Councillor Wilson?
Yeah, cheers, Chair. Just on that discussive behaviour, just in the last 3 weeks, I've had horrible reports of serious bad behaviour, gangs roaming around. I think it's Dewberry Street, Coronation Street, and one lady's been called. I'll see the word begins with C, and I'm not going any further on that one. But she's been called that a few times by the gangs that are roaming around. It's like Dewberry Street, Coronation Street, and Thornton Street. And she'd like to sell her house now. She wants to be out of Thornsby because of all this. And obviously, the house prices, what you're saying there is the house prices have gone up. But this report going back, it looks like it's 2019, 2-year-old. So, can we, is there any way we can move forward on that? Just check that out, see what gangs are roaming around Thornsby in that area? Thanks,
Yeah, of course. Is it youths? Is it gangs of youths?
Yeah, gangs of youths.
Yeah.
So it's horrible.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah. We're already in the process of dealing with this. So the neighbourhood safety officer, Sheila Bearcroft, met with police and neighbourhood wardens on Tuesday to discuss going forward the actions we're going to be taking with the youths. Some of the youths have already had warning letters. So those that have will be getting antisocial behaviour contracts. And the ones that haven't had warnings will be starting with the warning process for them. And then we'll follow that process. So they are on our radar and we are dealing with it.
I'll pass that on to her. I think she'll be happy with that. That's what the report coming up. Thank you.
By all means, though, give her our contact number. And if she does want to report anything in or speak to the neighbourhood safety officer, then Sheila will gladly speak to her as well.
Right, fine. That's fair enough. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Arundale, I believe you're next. Have you still got the question?
Thank you, Chair. Louise, I was involved when the first selective landlord licensing scheme was put in place in the Ormesby, obviously some years ago, 5 years ago. And at that time, it was said that they could only run it for 5 years. Now it's been redesignated for a further 5 years. It's been very successful. But is it expected? I mean, could we just keep renewing that indefinitely? Because that sort of goes against the whole idea of it only being licensed for 5 years. You know, it doesn't seem to be a bit of a logic to that.
Yeah. So with that, I think, you know, it was a new scheme. It was new to everybody. During that 5 years, as I've said in the evaluation, we did see some improvements in certain areas. But I think the way it's been described is, so we've just seen the buds coming up. We've just seen the buds of what we were doing. And what we didn't want to do was then to stop the scheme and for that to just go back down. What we want to see is we want to flourish. We want to see the flower. So although it's not something we would want to do time and time again, we just thought that all the hard work that had gone into it and those improvements that we'd started to see, if we didn't continue with another 5 years, then it would have all declined back. So that's why we redesignated.
Louise, can I just say, it would have been like what Gresham was like when we first implemented it all them years ago.
Right, thank you for that.
Welcome.
Okay, I see Councillor Lewis has a question. Go ahead, Councillor.
Yeah, thanks for that. I've got 2 questions actually, if I may. The first one, the scheme that the council's wanting to implement in a part of Newport, I think 125,000 comes to mind for quite a number of houses that are wanting to be upgraded. I just wondered, does any of this come under the selective landlord licence? And even maybe it's in the area that's, you know, that the council are going into next with it. And I just wondered who will benefit from that upgrade. Are you able to add to that, Louise?
I'm not aware of what that is. Is it around empty properties or?
Do you know, Julia? Would you come in on it, please?
Julia, you're on mute. Julia, you're on mute.
I'm having trouble with the buttons.
No, we can hear you now.
Yeah. I don't know anything about that. It was a separate question I wanted to ask.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So the other one was obviously it's going to be rolled out further in Newport. And when we covered selective landlord license in 2018, 2017, the idea was that next on the list was going to be Central Ward, obviously the university side of that. Is that still the plan?
As far as I'm aware, it's not at the moment. We are looking at the other side of Newport, because what you seem to get is a tumbleweed effect. So once you come into an area, it spreads out a little bit. So what we're seeing is the top end of Newport is now experiencing what the selective licensing side was experiencing. So that is the next on our agenda type of thing, and that's what fits the criteria at the moment. So that's the one that we're looking at next.
But that's still Newport. So after Newport, that's what I'm talking about.
It's discussions we can have. It's nothing that is in the pipeline at the moment, but you know, if the issues are there, something we could obviously look at.
Because obviously it's down to facts and figures, isn't it, of where you go next with it.
Yeah, and with the Newport as well, I don't know if this is connected to your first question, but there is the improvement there with the new builds that they're doing with 13 around sort of the university, where they've knocked down the old houses there. So that might be something in connection with the first question that you're asking.
Councillor Rostrom, have you still got a question?
Yes, thank you. First of all, I'd like to say that was a very comprehensive presentation, and I think I'd echo what Judith said. I'd congratulate the staff on the positive results that they've got. The question I've got to ask actually is that with the landlord licensing in Newport, in Park Ward, we've seen an increasing number of properties going to private landlords. Some of them are very good landlords. They look after the property. They get references for the tenants and such. But there are a group of other landlords who are just the opposite. And the impact that has on the surrounding community is unbelievable. People are selling the houses to get away from them. And the police are at the houses every other day. And I know, you're talking about spreading it, but I think there is a need to spread landlord licensing further across the town. I'm sure it's not just Park Ward. I mean, I was reading recently in The Guardian that there's a lot of problems with what were right to buy houses, because a lot of the right to buy houses are now in the hands of private landlords. People are living next to a social housing property and they're paying twice as much rent, and they're not getting the service. So I just think there is a need for us to look at other areas of the town as well as the central areas in North Ormesby. Thank you.
And we can look at that. I just think what we need to be mindful of as well at the moment, if we're less than 20%, we can bring this through executive. If it goes more than 20% of the area, then we've got to look at the Secretary of State approval, which can take a lengthy time as well. So obviously there's things like that to consider.
Councillor Wilson, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just going on what Councillor Rostrom said, my ward authority here, we've got the same problem. There's people want to sell the houses because the private landlord, they're just not doing anything about the antisocial behaviour in the houses next to them. And it's getting further afield in the estates and getting more obvious. There's just not many people who want to report it because they're scared of repercussions. And that's the big thing, is the repercussions and the scaremongering. That's where we are at the moment. Thanks, Chair.
Cheers. Any further questions? Councillor Arundale, go ahead.
Yeah, just to say that these sort of situations aren't unique to the centre of the town. There are properties all over the town in what somebody might call the leafy suburbs. Even in the area I live in, there are the odd houses owned by private landlords who don't look after them. The problem is criteria you need to declare an area as having a scheme put in has to be met, and it doesn't. If you've just got a few houses here and there, that doesn't fit the criteria to put in a scheme. So that's the problem we've got, unfortunately.
That's correct. But if you just remind residents in your wards as well that, there are neighbourhood safety officers, although not designated to the area, do cover each area in Middlesbrough. So obviously if there's antisocial behaviour, if there's issues at the property, they can report it in if it's through yourself or they do it themselves. And again, if there are issues with the houses, then environmental health, encourage them.
Well, it never extends to that. What it basically is, a lot of the time, is just to allow the property to go into rack and ruin externally. Right. And it's overgrown gardens and stuff. It just deteriorates the area, and it's not fair to the people who live next to them. But unfortunately, for them to be declared an eyesore property, they've got to be completely in the right hell of a state, and it's just unfair. But like I say, don't let people run away with the idea that it's just in central Middlesbrough or whatever. It's everywhere where these landlords have taken over. And I don't see any way we can, with the legislation as it is at the moment, that we can do much about it, to be quite honest.
Thanks, Councillor Arundel. Councillor Dodds?
I'd just like to second what Councillor Arundel is saying. In my ward, we have lots of private landlords. You walk around the estate and you can immediately see where these houses are that are rented, the overgrown gardens, the dirty windows, windows falling out. And it does bring the area down. And it isn't just in the centre of the town, it is everywhere. And I don't really know, I have complained on behalf of residents, especially about antisocial behaviour. And it gets done, but it comes back. The people are warned and they're quiet for a few months and then they start again. So I really don't know what else I can do. Perhaps somebody can advise me. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, neighbourhood safety officers have the same powers whether they're in a selective licensing area or any area of Middlesbrough. So, you know, there's processes that they can follow and they can work with landlords to try and get them to serve notice. But if that doesn't work and it is that bad, the antisocial behaviour, then they can also consider house closures if there's enough evidence to move forward with one. So, you know, it doesn't have to be selective licensing. A neighbourhood safety officer can do that in any area.
Thanks, Louise. I think we're getting a bit bogged down with ward issues. So have we any further questions relating to the presentation? Okay. I'd just like to thank Louise and Judith. It was an excellent presentation, very informative, and I think we all got a lot out of it. Thanks so much, Judith and Louise.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that. Very good.
Thank you.
Thank
Take
you.
care. Bye.
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 Chair, can you still hear us? I believe the chair might be having issues with his connection. Councillor Green-Wilson, would you be able to take on the chair role until we get Chris back, please?
That's going to be interesting.
No.
Right, I think what we've got now is the draft and final report of cultural events in Middlesbrough. Is that Scott's department?
Yes, Chair, I'm happy to take the panel through the report in the briefest of terms. I don't want to keep anybody. All members have had the report. I hope you've all had a chance to read it. Essentially, the report consists of 3 terms of reference, and the overarching emphasis of the report and the review was to examine cultural events in Middlesbrough, how they conducted and how they could be improved and what their impact was. The 3 terms of reference covered in the report include areas of best practice, i.e. what we're doing at the moment, why we're good at what we do at the moment, and how we deliver events at the moment. The second terms of reference was to explore new ways of delivering cultural events and exploring different formats. And if you remember, the committee heard from the British Esports Association. So that was the prime example that we used as an alternative event format for the purposes of the review. And the third and final terms of reference was how cultural events have an impact on wider financial implications and initiatives going on in the town. Ultimately, the first terms of reference covered events like Orange Pip and the Mila particularly, and it showcased and highlighted the good work that was being carried out with those events and what impact they had on the wider community and why those types of events should continue and why they should continue to receive investment and the attention that they get. The second terms of reference regarding esports was a little bit more extensive and showed that it's a burgeoning industry and was described during the meeting as an irresistible temptation, really, with a global audience of over 600 million people and an international budget as of 2020 of nearly $1 billion. There is a need to try to capitalize on some of that growth while that might sound somewhat abstract in the round, there is strong evidence to suggest that Middlesbrough already has a strong infrastructural base to attract that kind of event into the town. The Boho initiative and a lot of digital companies that already work in the town would be able to support things like an esports event. The report goes on to detail what an esports event is. Essentially, it's competitive video gaming that tries to synthesize the best of what a cultural event is traditionally held as. So a physical event where people arrive at a particular destination to take part in a particular celebration, but also it tries to synthesize that with our increasing reliance on virtual presence like we're doing today, so through a computer screen. In essence, you have an arena or a place that people can go to sit and actually watch the participants play computer games against each other. Essentially, it's always a team versus team, human versus human. It's never a human versus computer. But that is also broadcast out onto the internet for people to tune into, essentially, on social media platforms like YouTube and Twitch. There is a strong sense that things like esports could tie into wider economic and regeneration initiatives in the town and the leisure developments that are going on in the town. So I think that it's up to the panel now. I can answer any questions the panel may have about the content, but ultimately it's the panel to discuss the recommendations that will go into the report, Chair.
Yeah, it's a very good question. Can I just go on top of that one first, please? I'm just going through this, listen to what Scott's saying. Like two of my son-in-laws, next door neighbour, they actually play these esports. I know one of them talks to somebody in Germany. I'm pretty certain some of my son-in-laws actually play these games from home. So yeah, I think there's quite a wide scope there for everything. Going down the road and say, did we used to have computer cafes at one time, that type of thing?
Internet cafes, I think they were. It's not quite the same thing. Internet cafe was before the widespread availability of home broadband, essentially, and home internet connections. But the general principle would be the same. Essentially, you would have a venue where people would meet for the common goal of playing your computer games against each other. Generally speaking, that's the kind of thing that we're talking about. But it does have, if you were to create a venue where esports were held, then you would be able to potentially have associated leisure facilities, like a cafe, like an esports cafe, whereby, like going to the pub to watch football, they would be broadcast on big screens, highlights of previous tournaments, etc., with a theme around them of esports, etc., etc. So that as part of the report there, Chair, that although esports is an example of an alternative format, we shouldn't be losing sight of the fact that the rest of the report says that events as they are currently held are good. We have a strong cultural base in the town and a robust schedule of events that are taking place, but there may be a need to tweak and enhance those events to attract as wider audience as we possibly can. In the report, it suggests that even with our most celebrated events, such as the Mila, we still tend to attract within our local borders, even if that's slightly within the Tees Valley. We need to be able to attract a wider audience that attracts people into the town to showcase what we can do, which helps to feed into things like the place brand. And I think the report also tries to demonstrate that there's an inextricable link between a strong cultural base and a strong economic base as well. So we have to bear that in mind as well.
Thanks, Scott. Any questions on this one?
I think as well through you, John. Oh, sorry, Chair.
Yeah, go on. You're on mute, Ron.
Oh, yeah. It's not a question, actually. It's a comment, and it's about the Sikh event that's held every year on the Centre Square. I know for a fact that one does attract people, not only from the immediate region. It attracts people from wide and far. I've spoken to people from London and further afield, that come to it. So we are successful in some of them in attracting people from, I wouldn't say huge numbers from outside the area, but obviously when they come, they'll tell other people from where they've come, though, that's a great event, come along. So yeah, we can, I think, gradually increase our footfall from outside of the area by word of mouth of the people who attend. So that's a success story with that one anyway. Thank you.
I think on that one, I agree. I don't think we could create more venues within the town, Flintock Road or Capital Square plus layout. You might be able to create venues. That's something for the vet. Get your head around, I would think.
Would the panel have any ideas about the recommendations that they want to see going forward? If the panel would find it useful, Chair, there could be some suggestions made if the panel would want to consider them. If that would be, if that would be okay. There are several, and they tend to fall within the structure of the report, or they tend to follow the structure of the report. Essentially, one of them could be to enhance and strengthen community cohesion with cultural events traditionally taking place in a central location like Centre Square or Albert Park and such. There were discussions, because of COVID, there were discussions of taking the Christmas festivities, for example, out of the town centre and into the community, a bit like a trail. I believe this work may be kind of going on and it may be already underway, but that could be a recommendation that not just the Christmas events, but all events could have an element or a component of them that go out into the various communities to engage with those communities that wouldn't ordinarily come into town centre or engage with cultural events in that way. That would help to reinforce and strengthen community cohesion potentially, if that would be a recommendation that the panel agree with.
I can go back now, Scott. I'm back online, thank goodness.
Right.
So
hand up there. Hand up there.
Yeah. Councillor Arundel, go ahead.
I can see where you're coming from with that idea. Worth a try, but I think it might be impracticable, to be quite honest. The likes of the Mela and such as that.
Yeah, I think that I don't think it would be the whole celebration. So the Mela, for example, being such a large event, you wouldn't want to take that as a roadshow, for example, but there may be elements, offshoots of that. So you could have, they already do this kind of thing, whereby smaller offshoot events could be taken into the communities. The details of that could be worked up by the events team, and I'm sure they'd be able to, to give us an idea as to whether that's a possibility or not. But I think that there were kind of discussions driven by COVID, but it's probably not such a bad idea to try and enhance and support community cohesion, to draw people either into the cultural arena and to take the message out into the communities as well. So it's a potential recommendation for the panel. Would that be something the panel would want to put down?
I would certainly go with that, Scott. Yeah. How do others feel? Councillor Dodds, go ahead and.
I think it sounds a good idea. There's some gardens that could be used, areas within Albert Park and Stuart Park. And it doesn't have to be Centre Square, and some people might feel more comfortable going out into a park. Also, there's Pallister Park, and there's I'm trying to think of another area, a green area outside of the town. We have other areas that we could be using. Just something for to think about. I'll think about it and write a few notes for next time, Scott. Thank you.
Oh, okay, we need to, I think, through you, Chair, I think that in order to get the report agreed here, then to OSB and then to Executive, we do need to have an agreed set of recommendations that could go into the report. Potentially, they could be tweaked outside of the meeting through an email, but ideally, the bulk of the recommendations ideally need to be recommended today, by the panel. Again, some other suggestions could be, and again, if we go back to esports, that because of its significance and because of its growth, that the council explore the potential or explore holding an esports event and maybe holding it as part of the regular schedule of cultural events that we have, and that should be tied in with the wider economic leisure initiatives that we have going on in the town. That could be something the service area could look at.
Yeah, I'd just like to add, Scott, about esports. It looks like we're behind the world because the USA are big on it, Korea's big on it, and it's just in its infancy here in England. So it would be a good area to pursue, to be honest. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, Chair. I think Councillor Wilson and Councillor Dodds have something.
I think it's Councillor Wilson first. Go ahead, Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, I'm just looking through 13, Scott. It looks like the dirty great arena full of bodies. Or is that just a showpiece?
That was pre-COVID. That was a photograph pre-COVID. Yes, so that's an indication. The image within the report, I think it's from Germany, an event in Germany. That's to give you an idea of the type of event that was held pre-COVID. Post-COVID, in a post-COVID world, what that would look like, I don't know. That would be, dependent on the prevalence of COVID in any at any given time. But any event, in any event, and any type of activity, I think there will have to be some kind of COVID security around it, whether or not that is social distancing, wearing of face coverings, etc. But that will be largely dependent on the prevalence of COVID and the national agenda from government, really. That was just to give the panel a flavour of the type of things I mean by esports, because again, like you say, Chair, it is relatively unknown in the UK, so it's just to give people an idea of what it's like.
It's just a daft idea, really, but as a trial, could we not use either a big screen on Centre Square or even I worked with Mr. Gibson and use the Riverside as a trial?
It's a big screen.
There could be something like that, yes, absolutely. I think the details of where it would be held and the venue and the logistics would need to be worked out by the service area. I think from the panel's perspective, thinking more strategically, the idea of being able to hold an event as a proof of concept to attract inward investment and to show that the town can think outside the box, I suppose, in this regard, would be for the panel to decide. We could pass that to the service area and they would be determining if how that would be executed, I suppose.
You got it, Chris?
I think he has. Graham,
I
don't think it's actually in its infancy in this country. My grandson plays these games, although I have warned him not to get involved in these esports in the big way. But we did meet a young man, 6 years ago, who was playing these games in Manchester and up in Scotland. And he said to my grandson, "Yeah, the standard you're at, you can be making money." And I said, "No, don't tell him. I don't want him to know that." But he attended lots of venues in Great Britain. So
yes,
it does happen, but I wouldn't know how and where to start to set it up.
I think through you, Chair, I think to say it's in its infancy might be a bit of a misnomer. It is growing. I think it is a presence in the UK. And if anyone wants more information on esports, what I would do is strongly recommend you have a look at the British Esports Association's website. They're a charity. They're not a regulator, but they're kind of the hub for all things esports. So if anyone wants information on the benefits that it brings, both from an educational and financial perspective, I would strongly recommend trying the British Esports Association's website there. That would help provide you with a lot of information. Yeah, to say it's in its infancy in the UK is a bit of a misnomer. It's not as large as other areas in the world, but it's not small.
It's growing fast.
Yeah.
Okay, cheers, Scott. As you know, I missed a bit there. I went offline. Did we get enough recommendations to go ahead?
I think so, Chair. I think through you and with the permission of the panel, I think that I've got 3 recommendations there that I can go with. Would the panel be amenable to me circulating and to articulate those recommendations that have been suggested today, and then agreeing that via email? Because it'll just be articulating the recommendations that have come forward this afternoon, rather than creating any.
Are we possibly looking for any more venues, Scott? The possible venues where these could happen?
We could do. I think that's a bit too specific for the recommendations of the scrutiny report. I think that with the availability of the venues and the technical aspect involved in that, and the suitability of the venues, that would be left to the service area to determine where we could hold them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Scott.
Thank you, Chair.
Any further comments? Okay. Yeah, please go ahead with that, Scott.
Go for it.
Thanks for your input. Okay, we'll move on to item 6. Sorry, yes, item 6. Terms of reference, tough enough, enforcement in Middlesbrough and its impact on crime and antisocial behaviour. And I'd like to bring in Susie Blood on this one. Susie, can you say a few words?
Thanks, Chair. Yes, at the last meeting in July, it seems such a long time ago, it was agreed by the panel that you wish to have a look at enforcement and its impact on crime and antisocial behaviour in the town. So within the pack, there is some draft it's because you just talked about recommendations. We've got recommendations on my brain. Draft terms of reference. However, I've changed them slightly. So I'm just going to share them on my screen if I can, and I'll just run through them quickly, Chair, if I may. Are you able to see that? Can you see
that's
that
fine,
okay?
Susie.
Yeah, lovely, that's great. Sorry, there was a bit of a silence there. So obviously kind of entitled it tough enough to look at the enforcement. So terms of reference 1 is to examine the powers set out with the Crime and Disorder Act 1998 and how this has shaped Middlesbrough's partnership working to tackle crime and antisocial behaviour in the town. So within that one, we'd be looking at the Community Safety Partnership, and we'll be looking at the teams within the Community Safety Partnership and how they have kind of formed since the Crime and Disorder Act of 1998 and what they do in terms of pulling together their resources to tackle crime and antisocial behaviour. So if that one would be agreed, we would sort of look at that at the next meeting and we'd bring in a number of teams. I wouldn't get all of the teams in at one meeting because I think that might be a bit too much in terms of information overload. But we would look at specific teams in detail. Then the next terms of reference is to understand the nature and levels of antisocial behaviour across the town. So that would be looking over kind of a past 2-year period and looking at the statistics from a kind of ward by ward basis to see where obviously the most prevalent areas of antisocial behaviour occur. And crime, obviously, we know some of the areas, but sometimes some areas surprise you as well. So we thought we could have a look at that. Thirdly, I know the panel's really keen to kind of talk to residents, and hopefully by then we might be able to do that face to face. So it's to kind of understand perceptions and impacts of crime and antisocial behaviour in the town on residents. And that can be done kind of across the ward or in one specific ward, depending on what members would like to do. And fourthly, in the initial meeting, Jeff Field alluded to locality working and how there was going to be a sort of partnership across the board to look at antisocial behaviour and kind of specifically look at things that they can do to improve areas. Now, I do know that one of the children's scrutiny panels is looking at locality working as a main review. So we wouldn't particularly want to step on their toes, but because this is just kind of one element of it, and I've been quite specific that we want to see what the impact has been on residents and in terms of antisocial behaviour and crime, and also to see the merits of a wider rollout, because I do feel that I do believe from what I've read that they want to do this town-wide. I feel that we're okay to roll with that one if the panel's happy. And obviously we wouldn't look at that now, we'd look at that in a few months' time, because I know obviously due to COVID there has been delays in rolling out that locality model. So if members are happy with those terms of reference, we can start looking at terms of reference 1, and I'll go ahead and make kind of formal arrangements for officers to come to the next meeting. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Susie. Yeah, anyone, any comments? I'm happy for Susie to go ahead with that.
Yeah, go ahead with it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it seems fine by me. Yeah, go ahead with that. Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah,
Thanks very
sounds
much.
lovely.
That's lovely. Thank
Sounds
you.
lovely, Susie.
Thank you.
Okay, no worries, no worries. Okay then, so we'll move on. I'll talk about the last OSB meeting. I'll keep it brief because I might be cut off again, who knows. But basically at the last OSB meeting, the mayor attended and he talked about the progress he was making and his aims and aspirations for the future. The Chief Exec provided an update for the board, and an update was provided by the scrutiny chairs. Okay, so that's it for the OSB update. So I'll move on yet again. Item 8, any other urgent matters? And I have none, and I can't see anyone else voicing any urgent matters. Brilliant. So I can bring this meeting to an end. Sorry about the technical problems, but thank you all for attending, and hope to see you again. Thank you.
Cheers, Chris.
Thank you,
See ya.
Chair.
Thanks,
Bye.
Thanks,
Andy.
Chair.
Thanks,
Thanks, Chair.
Scott.
Thanks, Susie. Thanks, Graham.
Where's my thing gone now?
Scott, it says we're still live.
2 seconds.